Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time, and I'm here for another garden update. And just so you know right off the bat, because it might be 2-3 days before I get this out, today is actually April 15th. So mostly today I wanted to focus a little bit on some container gardening and planting beans, and then show you a few things I've started around here. So I'm out here on the front deck. You see my strawberries are starting to take off as far as just the greenery anyway. Should start seeing some flowers on them anytime. This gooseberry, it's like I said, it's a red gooseberry, just amazing flavor, is getting little buds. So maybe this year I'll get a bunch of berries on it instead of just one. So more strawberries here, and then over here in a couple of pots I've transplanted a couple of my dwarf nasturtiums. So I'm finding with the dwarf nasturtiums, they're the best one for growing in pots, while your bigger ones do better directly in the ground. So I'll just stay up here on the deck and do it from this side. So you can see out there my rhubarb, my 2 rhubarbs, and then my potatoes. You can't really see anything from here, but I do have a few of them starting to come up through from under those pots. And again, if you're new, those pots are there just to protect the potatoes until for a while. And eventually I'll just block the chickens off from that area, but it's just to keep them from digging it up. But yeah, eventually I'll be planting beets and stuff in here, and the chickens will have to be blocked off. We've moved our grapefruit trees out front here on the deck. They're really happy, so they got a lot of new growth, and still no scale has returned. My fig that Lisa Booker got me in honor of my mom to remember her by is doing good. And then right there I just moved some poppies in a little pot out here. Eventually they'll be planted out here in this area. Those were the seed that I got from Wendy. And then out here on the back deck now, coming around to the back, right here I've planted another nasturtium. I did put those beans in there, and then I've got a nasturtium there, and then there's that fig. I don't know, we'll see. I keep watering it, we'll see what happens. And guess what, I have pansies. Because right after I shot that video about how I was just not going to bother with them this year, Patrick went out and bought me 6 plants. And I got, you can see a couple more nasturtiums. So I switched the pots around. So the ones I planted the lettuce seed in, I moved up there. And then, yeah, so I can have the pansies here, because they need a little more sun than the lettuce does. And this gets though it's getting a lot of sun right now, it won't be long before it won't be getting any, because you can see this shade here. Shadow is going to move down as the sun moves. And you can see here my cloth wipes that I've switched entirely to now. I've got them out drying in the sun. Will not be going back to toilet paper at all now. I'm very happy with this. I did do a video on this, but I'll be doing an update so I can tell you about my washing procedure. It's easy, it's clean, they come out smelling fresh, and it's cheap. Hardly any extra work. Okay, so over here, this calendula right here is actually one coming up from last year. This is a green onion coming back from last year. Transplanted a few nasturtiums in each one of these pots. Right now these antlers are here to prevent, because the chickens, though they don't belong on the deck, they still come up here and like to peck the dirt out. So having these, since all my other pots like this are over my potatoes, normally I'd have one over each pot, but at least we have these antlers and they make a good protection. So I did also plant calendula seed in each one of these. It's orange, pink, and then yellow. I'll keep at least one in each of these pots, but then I'll move the rest of them around the main garden areas. And you can see we've got some flowers starting to open up on the blueberries. Grapevines are still not doing anything. Now somebody asked me if I prune my grapevines. Well, believe it or not, this is after pruning probably about 2/3 to 3/4 of them away. I kind of have a system here, and there's a reason why I leave a bunch like I do, and part of that is the privacy shield they add once they totally fill in, and it just makes it just a beautiful little Garden of Eden up here on our deck. The red currants are starting to get some buds for berries. You can see right in there. And they're all over, so these should be thick with berries this year. So I got one there and then one there. So now coming out here, well, let me show you a little bit what I did here first. So remember how I was talking about fencing this area off? Well, I actually took that netting out and then took the rest of the fencing that we've had around all the way around this whole main garden area, and it had stopped here. It was a big roll, and we stretched it out here, so I was able to take that other netting down, and I'll talk about what I did with that in a minute. And then we stretched it across this area here and over to where you see those Lexan panels over there, so that I was able to put my transplant my sunflowers in here. So I've got a whole row of sunflowers and also a marshmallow root planted all along that strip, and so the chickens can at least still roam around this area, dig and get bugs and worms and stuff. Eventually, of course, they'll be totally blocked off from this area. So now that I've got that netted out from the chickens there, I went ahead and transplanted some chicory. I've got a few other things planted in here I'll talk about eventually. I did have to move that valerian back about, well, because it was right over there where you can kind of see a divot, and I had to move it over here so that it would be on this side, because Patrick, you know, he's always good about making sure the fencing is straight line, where I'm not. So it was too far out that way. Now let's go over here and talk about my beans. So we had some leftover Lexan panels from when we did the greenhouse, when we re-roofed the greenhouse years ago. And so what we've done, so that I could get my beans started a little earlier, which I just planted today, is we've basically made a mini greenhouse. So this serves several purposes. So it will help protect the beans as they're trying to come up, you know, keep them a little warmer, and also we can still allow the chickens to dig around in here. But even if it wasn't for the chickens, having something to help keep the robins from pulling up the beans as they first come up. The beans usually aren't a problem with the robins like the peas are, but yeah, so anyway, this is a good way to protect them. And we didn't have enough to go on that opposite side, but I still think it's it's good protection. But the chickens still can't get around here now because we have this going straight across, so they can't dig up or peck or pull up the beans that I just planted today. So before I plant the beans, what I do is I soak them overnight. So I've got a picture here of them in the bowl when I first put them in there, and then how they looked today just before I planted them. And you can see they plumped up pretty good, and I just find that just works a little bit better for the beans. And then back over here to where this is mainly my squash patch, but also growing snow peas on this side. We did, see, I didn't know where all this was, where Patrick had all this stored. So he took out the fiberglass that was like that doesn't allow enough light in, and switched it out with the Lexan or the polycarbonate. And you can see through there how good the peas are starting to look. I should have a bunch more starting to pop up out of the ground anytime soon. And then I just water it from up there. But these are the ones most likely to get pulled up by the robins, and now they can't get to it at all. And then the chickens again can still roam around here until I'm ready to put my squash in the ground, which I do have started in the greenhouse. So I'll just block this whole area off. We'll take that out, and then the chickens won't be able to get in there. So basically what's happening is we just keep making their area a little smaller all the time. And then back in the greenhouse, this is the netting I had around that perennial herb section of my main garden bed. And I did get some of my tomatoes in the ground, so this is just going to be temporary. Back here, I went ahead and netted that off, even though I don't have anything planted there yet. That's where I like to grow my cucumbers. And then I'd like to just keep allowing the chickens to be able to come in here. But, you know, this section here is where I'll put the rest of my tomatoes. So I'd like to get some more netting if I can find some. I tried to purchase some more of that black stuff I got last year, and it's like tripled in price. So anyway, I'd like to see if I can find something to block this area off, so the chickens can still come in, and I can just go ahead and get the rest of my tomatoes in the ground. A little bit more about container gardening. So I grow all my peppers. You can see I've got little tiny pepper plants I've transplanted into these bigger pots. And I grow them all in pots because I find for here in our area, they do best in pots here in the greenhouse up on a shelf like this. And this is the south side of the greenhouse where they can get the most amount of sun. And then same thing with my basil. I got some basil coming up in here. This is where my basil does best. I've tried it in the garden. I've tried it down in the ground next to the tomatoes. It's supposed to grow good next to tomatoes. no, it's not a good option for us. Having them in pots up high, and especially in the greenhouse, is what does best for us here. I mentioned the currants, but you can see currant in pot, and then strawberries in pots. Same thing with my strawberries. Strawberries always do best for me in pots rather than directly in the ground, where I can get them up higher. They just stay free more from slugs that way, and I don't know, they just do better. And then my blueberries, I've talked about before. I did a video I think it's been 2 years ago, on growing blueberries in pots. And you can see I've got grass piled heavily on here. And yep, I just let them dandelions grow right in there if they want to, as long as they don't totally take over the pot, which they haven't yet. These ones have been in here for a couple of years. Then I just harvest the leaves and the flowers right from there, and then the dandelion helps feed the blueberries. So not all of them have dandelions in them, a few do. Some have clover. That's a red clover there, and I just let it go because it's good for it. I did a video on the blueberries, and one of the questions I'll go ahead and link to down below, but one of the questions I didn't answer in that video that I keep getting is, do I move them? Nope, they're on. Patrick made these little dollies they've got wheels on them, so we can move them around, but that's only so we can put a finish on the deck every so often, a protective coating, and that's the only reason why. We never move them inside for winter. They do just fine out here, but you also have to keep in mind we have very mild winters, so they do like a lot of acidic soil, so we put blood meal in there, chicken manure, actually just scraping straight from the chicken floor, and then lots of grass clippings. Just keep piling them on there. And yeah, so blood meal is the only thing we put on there that we actually purchase. We do throw banana peels in them, and you might have seen on that gooseberry out front, I had some banana peels in that as well. But banana peels go everywhere. They go in the main garden, they go in all the pots. But one thing you have to keep in mind when you're talking about anything when you're container gardening, you have to make sure you keep your things watered. They're more likely to dry out in containers than they will if they're directly in the ground. All right, well, that's it for my garden update for today. There will be more to come. I still eventually am going to get back to that west side herb garden so that you can see the update on that, see how things are coming along, and see what all's growing. So more to come. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.